we move on to the next bill, House Bill 5184, sponsored by Chairwoman Serper. It's an act related to motor vehicles and other vehicles. And miscellaneous rules. It repeals the requirement that law enforcement officers issue only warnings of the risks to persons leaving a child under the age of 7 unattended in a motor vehicle. Chairwoman Serpa, are you on?
I am on, Chair.
There you are.
Yeah. Okay, there I am. And thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for hearing this legislation. And unlike my colleagues, I've had the opposite problem with this piece of legislation. The Senate always passed it. I think they passed it for 2 years in a row, and our side just doesn't seem to like it. So we've worked on the legislation that Senator Raptakis, he has the Senate companion bill. It's really very simple. In the past, law enforcement officers, and Rep. Norrie is probably familiar with this, law enforcement officers were allowed to simply issue a warning to anyone who left a child under the age of 7, unattended in a motor vehicle. So we intend to strike all that language and simply, as the legislative explanation says, repeal the requirement that law enforcement officers issue only warnings of the risks to person leaving a child under 7 unattended in a motor vehicle, and actually let them be charged. Allow the Attorney General's office to apply the current statute for child abandonment. This was most recently evidenced just about a month ago, even less than a month ago, at the Burlington Post in Garden City. A couple left a 14-month-old baby girl unattended in a car, no heat, on a cold night, and only because a passerby happened to hear this 14-month-old in the car seat crying did she call for law enforcement. Law enforcement charged the couple with child abandonment, I believe, cruelty or neglect of a child, and they have referred the case to the Attorney General's office. DCYF was called, and the child was placed in temporary placement. So we would like to see that happen more often. And, I do have a couple of friends and relatives in law enforcement, and they feel, as Rep. Norrie says, handcuffed by this current statute that simply issue a warning. It has terrible consequences, except for the goodness of people who pass by and happen to hear children crying. We've heard stories in this state of it happening in Twin River. I believe there was another one outside of a convenience store in Providence. This one more recently right in Garden City. So we would like to completely exorcise that being okay to just issue a warning and warn the parents and actually charge the parents. And it's that simple.
Any questions from the members of the committee for the chairwoman/sponsor?
Bob, I have a comment, not a question. This is Julie. I just want to commend Chairwoman Serper. She does a lot of work with child welfare. I think this is a really good bill, and I hope we can get it past the House this year.
I agree.
Thank you, Chairwoman Casimiro.
Any other? John? Nobody? John, you're still muted.
I want to
unmute.
Chairwoman, does this go far enough? Should we raise that to 10 or 9 or 11 or what do you think? Have you received any conversation, any documentation that suggests 7 may not go far enough?
Do you mean raise it to 7 or 9 or 10
yes.
warnings?
Yes.
Warnings?
No. To change that number 7 to maybe 10 years old or 11 years old or 12 years. Just asking, just a question.
Well, I will leave that. I will leave that to the good judgment of the committee. That's certainly something I'd be willing to negotiate with. If you think 7 is too old or too young, we could certainly leave, play with that number, but I think you all agree, especially those of you who've had children or care for children, have your nieces and nephews.
No, we're losing her.
It's just egregious. And frankly, I'm going to say it, it's perfectly correct, but those people don't deserve to be parents. I'm sorry. I believe my animal as
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
and
Edie Agella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you,
I believe that.
Chairwoman Serpa, for championing this issue of safety for children and animals in being left in cars. It's been a couple days since I read the bill, but my memory is that there is no requirement in the bill. It is deleting, the legislation would delete the opportunity for a charge to be made. No, it would delete the opportunity for a law enforcement officer to warn someone. And just imagining, I know we hear about the most egregious cases, but I can imagine a situation where a police officer might be passing by and notice someone get out of a car and head into a convenience store and the officer pulls up then and notices that there's a child in the car. That person is out right away again, or maybe just going in to pay for gas and coming out again. Or something like that, where the person's going to be away from the car for seconds, not even perhaps a minute. And I would want the police officer there to have the discretion of a warning, as opposed to the person left the child in the car alone, and so having to charge them. A comment.
Any more comments or questions of the sponsor?
Representative
Yes,
Norrie? Rep. Norrie, Chairman?
Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I want to just agree with Rep. Agello as the mom of a 6 and an almost 9-year-old right now. I think we do need to have a distinction between someone who potentially leaves a 9-year-old in the car and runs in to pick up a prescription, and of course, parents who leave their 14-month-old in the cold, locked in their car while they go to gamble at Twin River, or whatever situation that we are putting folks in. As a parent now, we are under a microscope. We certainly would never do a lot of the things that my parents did, like leave us home alone at a certain age, even when I was a kid. But I do think that there is a line where we would want to say certain things would be acceptable or unacceptable, and there's a lot of gray area in terms of how old a child is. Certainly a police officer can't ascertain that if they just walk by and happen to see a child in a car. They have no idea how old that child is, and they don't know what the parents are doing. And so I would agree with Rep. Agello that I would definitely want to see something that allowed for there to be a difference between serious negligence and between a parent who, even out of necessity, has run into a convenience store. And especially with the advantages we have in our vehicles now, I do not do this, but I could lock both of my kids in the car, and nobody could get in or get out if I ran into a store for a moment to pick something up. So those would be my concerns about the bill as it is written, like Rep. Agello's. Thank you.
Chairman, Representative Norrie?
Representative Norrie, go ahead.
Having run into this situation several times throughout my career, having multiple businesses in Coventry, the discretion is always there for the police officer. It's 100%, it's a given that that officer has the discretion to issue a warning without having to call a supervisor or make that decision. At present, we have a warning and we have an arrest for child neglect. I think it's an excellent opportunity that we already have the discretion, don't need the law to give us discretion, that there's a middle ground which would be a violation to be issued. So again, we presently have two extremes, and this really bridges that gap to give us an opportunity to have something that's less damaging to someone. Thank you.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Yes, Carol. Unmute, Carol. Carol, unmute. Oh, there you are.
Oh,
There you go.
now,
There you go.
to Representative Norrie, I want to say, there is the discretion, but wouldn't a warning, if we're going to eliminate the warning, wouldn't a police officer rather know about a habitual offender, say, if you've got 5 warnings on a parent who keeps leaving the kids in the car, even if it is just for a short amount of time, but in a public setting, I think that might be concern for alarm after you catch somebody doing it several times. I don't know. So I just thought I would throw that out there. Maybe it's just another tool in the toolbox, as you say. So it's not mandatory that you issue a warning, nor is it mandatory that you charge the person. You always have discretion. But maybe it's something just to, you know, just to warn somebody that they shouldn't keep doing this. So just my thought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, if I could just respond real quick to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So,
Tom.
every police department, every officer has a mobile data terminal to respond to all their calls with a narrative. Part of the requirement for officers who are handling calls as such is they have drop-down boxes where they fill in names and information of people that they had contact with. So if this were, say, the same community over and over dealing with the same person, once they put their name in the system, they could easily open up that drop-down and read the past contacts, calls for service, and what type of contacts that they've had with that person. So again, it would say in there that, you know, that they had a previous contact with the individual. On this date, they were warned not to leave their child in the car at, say, Dunkin' Donuts or CVS or whatever it may be. And that information is all readily available for the officer. If the officer wants to take that extra step to say, hey, is this person a habitual offender? Have they done it before? So again, the warning is automatic. It's already there. Just because they put it on paper doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Thanks, Tom. Any further questions of the committee of the sponsor? Okay, I don't see any. The next witness is Terry Sullivan, and I believe, Roberta, that Randall Rose is signed up, but he doesn't indicate that a phone number, so.
He did give us one, Chairman.
Did he? Okay.
Yes.
All right, Terry Sullivan first. Terry Sullivan?
Yes, hello.
Hello, you're
Hi.
on air, and you're speaking to the House Judiciary Committee on Chairwoman Serper's bill on leaving kids in cars and warnings. If you wish to testify, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for hearing me today. I do appreciate it. I just have a few things to say. This bill we've been trying to push through for pretty close to 10 years now, and I'm hoping that this time is the charm. Everybody remembers what happened last month in Cranston with the couple who left the kid in the over 30 minutes in the car at Burlington Coat Factory. But they probably didn't remember the one in October with the 2-month-old when both parents went into Cumberland Farms in Providence and left the 2-month-old in the car, and somebody stole the car. So luckily, whoever this criminal was left the baby, car seat and all, at a Compass self-storage unit, and thank God the baby was fine. But, I mean, this stuff happens. You can't leave your kids alone in the car. And I realize with COVID, people are doing it more so because they don't want to bring their kids into places. But it's so dangerous. I mean, not to jump around, but, I mean, a child's body will overheat 5 times faster than an adult. And just when it's 70 degrees outside, in 10 minutes, the inside of that car can get over 90 degrees. I mean, and that's something you really don't think of. So, I mean, I don't know, does anybody have any questions to me? I mean, this bill is kind of self-explanatory. Rhode Island and Arkansas are the only 2 states that have statutes authorizing law enforcement to provide a verbal warning, but yet no records are kept of any incidences. Nothing. So somebody could go to Providence Place Mall, do it, get the slap on the wrist from the police, then turn around and go somewhere else and do it, and it could be habitual. Nobody knows. There's no records. I mean, most states have some type of law or a proposed law at this time to prevent all this. Last year was the highest year of child mortality with children being left into cars. The highest year. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. It's getting frustrating at this point. Any questions?
Understood. Do any of the members of the committee have a question for Terry Sullivan?
Can I say something?
Yes.
Terry Sullivan, first of all, she's my constituent, and I tell you that she has been pushing for this to go in for ever since when I was first elected, so it has been a while. And to me, I have to agree that the legislation needs to pass, because how many warnings do we need to give? If we need to give parents a warning not to leave their kids in the car, I mean, it's common sense, right? So
Exactly.
That's all I have to say. I'm going to support the bill.
Roberts, are there any other questions of members of the committee for Terry Sullivan? I'm not seeing anybody unless somebody's outside of my view and they haven't spoken up. I'll presume that I've reached everybody. All right, then, Roberta, Randall Rose on the phone, or is he available?
He is. He's up next.
Okay. Randall Rose.
Yes, I'm on.
Hi, Randall. It's Bob Craven. You're in front of the Committee on Judiciary testifying on Chairwoman Serpa bill in relationship to warnings and other issues involving children in cars under 7 years of age or under. Please proceed.
Thank you. So, yes, I am testifying against this bill. The language we have in the law is there for a reason, for a good reason, and I'm hearing a lot of comments from that show that people may not be aware of all the details of this issue. There are cases where kids have died in cars, especially in hot weather, because cars do tend to overheat. It is extremely rare, but it does happen sometimes. It's almost entirely a Sunbelt problem. It is so extremely rare. It has not happened in the last 10 years in Rhode Island. That's one thing to be aware of. But this is an issue where it is something that does happen. It's at risk of happening in the summer months. It doesn't have to be a super hot day, but if it's a fairly hot day, cars do heat up more than the outside temperature. So you do have to be careful for kids under 7. Not for older kids, and I have to warn people about that mistake. I heard some people talking about extending it to people older than 7. Kids older than 7 never are at risk. They know how to get out of cars themselves. This kind of thing is a danger in Sunbelt states in hot weather for kids 7 and under. There are a number of different opinions that parents have about this kind of thing. Some parents are very careful. They know about when it's dangerous for kids and when it's not. They are careful not to leave their kids in a car in cases where there is a real danger to the kid. But there are parents who are also aware of the situation, and while they would not leave their car and the kid in a situation that actually is dangerous, they would not leave the kid in a car in a situation that actually is dangerous, they are willing to do the kind of thing that several representatives have talked about, leave a kid in the car briefly while you go inside. I know to other parents that seems unthinkable, it seems obviously wrong, but some parents are aware that there is very little danger in most kinds of weather, and they know when it's safe to leave their kids in the car for a few minutes and when it's not. I know there were some fears raised about what happens if there's a carjacking or something. I'm very familiar with the statistics on what happens there. When there's a carjacking, a thief steals a car and doesn't notice that there's a kid inside. In any situation when there's a carjacking, in any situation when a car is stolen with a kid inside, the kid is always returned. That's not what the thieves are after. The thieves want the car. I've seen that over and over. I've researched a lot of cases where this has happened. For many kinds of parents, many kind of parents do find it important to make sure their kids are never alone in the car. But other parents are not necessarily in that situation. If you're a single mother, you may not be able to avoid leaving your kid in the car for brief periods of time in many situations, especially if you're looking for a job or whatever situation you might be in. If you're not well off and you're a single mother, there may be times when, for the interest of your family, the safest thing to do is to leave the kid in the car for a certain short period of time when you know that the weather is not dangerous. And unfortunately, this is an issue that people get very passionate about. Some people are so strict about it, they think, no, you must never leave it in the car. They can't imagine how a good parent could do that. And other parents know that it is safe to do that sometimes. And they do the research, they make their own decisions, and they know it's safe to do that, and they are definitely judged by other people. Now, if Representative Serpa's bill passes, what we're going to see is people being harassed by police, issued a violation or charged for things that the parents know happens to be safe, because in our society, there are many people who have the opinion that, no, you must never do this. And there are many other parents who have done the research and know, actually, it's safe to do it sometimes. And unfortunately, if Representative Serpa's bill passes, some innocent parents who are not endangering their kids at all will be charged with violations or worse in situations when they know it's safe. There's only one recorded case, actually, of any kid ever dying in a hot car in Rhode Island, and that was James Limburner in Warwick. And I've read the coverage. It happened in 2009. The parents were definitely not at fault. James Limburner just wandered from his house into the car in the driveway, and unfortunately it overheated. It was very tragic, and the media covered it very sympathetically. There was a fundraiser for his family. I think the Warwick City Council or the Warwick Police Department, I don't remember which, but they did some kind of benefit for him. That's the only time it's ever happened in Rhode Island, in a case where the parents were definitely not at fault, and everybody realized it. So there's never been a case where a parent a parent's fault has led to a kid dying this way in Rhode Island, because we just don't have the climate where it's much of a risk, although good parents are aware of the risk and know when it's important to make sure their kid is not in the car. But if you're an impoverished single mother, you will have to do that sometimes. And some of us, I think, may admit that even if we're not impoverished single mothers, we have done that sometimes when we judged it safe. But under this bill, we run the risk of being judged by people who have a different approach to parenting, being issued a violation or worse, or having DCYF come after you as a parent, and it's not necessary. As has already been admitted, our current law allows parents to be charged with child neglect when they do something really dangerous. That's happened in the cases that have been mentioned recently, and our laws are adequate. But I think I'm just asking the committee to be aware that there are parents with very different schools of thought on this. There are good parents who do leave their kids in the car sometimes. There are good parents who insist you must never, never do this. And if we let the law be the vehicle to inscribe the idea that you must never do this, or if we leave it up to a police officer's discretion, where the police officer may have a different approach to parenting than the actual parent does, it's going to lead to a lot of punishment of innocent people, because in most situations, the parents know best. So I ask people to be aware that this is not a crisis that needs solution. This is a case that parents with their different parenting philosophies are handling for the most part very well, and the rare exceptions where where parents are not handling it well are already handled under current law. If this bill passes, it will just lead to judgmental punishments and violations against parents who were issued by officers and other authorities who simply are not sympathetic to their approach to parenting. So for those reasons, I oppose the bill. Thank you.
Any questions of the members of Randall Rose?
This is Representative Casimiro. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Sure.
Mr. Rose, do you have children?
No, I do not.
And you spoke earlier about just good parents. Do you believe that there are bad parents out there?
I believe that people have many different kinds of parenting philosophies, and I believe that some people do the work of parenting relatively better and some relatively worse, and the people with different parenting philosophies can do a good job, and often you don't know it at the time what you're doing well as a parent and what you're not doing well as a parent. But hopefully, with goodwill from the different people in the family, it can work out, and the inevitable mistakes people make in parenting can be compensated for, and people can live good lives. But yeah, I do think that there are some people who I'd say do excellent jobs at parenting, and some of them are people who would be willing to leave their kids in the car sometimes, even if it leads to being judged by others.
Okay, and do you really believe a car stolen with a kid in it is okay because cars get returned later? Is that what you said?
That was not what I said, or certainly not how I meant to be understood. But what I'm saying is there's a line of reasoning some parents use, and some parents say, look, cars get stolen sometimes, therefore you must never, never leave the kid in the car because something terrible could happen to the kid if the car gets stolen. What I'm saying is stealing the car is not okay. It's not good to risk having your car be stolen. But I'm saying that in the rare situations, and it's very rare, that a car is stolen with a kid inside it, the car thief always returns the baby promptly thereafter, because that's not what the car thief was after. I'm
going to ask my colleagues on this committee to push for this bill to go forward, because I think it's our responsibility to do everything we can to keep children safe. And I just, my opinion, my humble opinion.
And if I may respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
If I respond to that, Mr. Chair, I mean, it does sound like a good idea. We must do everything we can to keep children safe. But I don't want that to be driven by some mythical idea that what if the car gets stolen, then automatically something terrible will happen to the kid, which is not true. I just want to make clear that's a false fear. And second, the idea that you have to use the law and the punishments of the law to do everything we can to keep kids safe I'm sorry to say it, it's not always true. It's misguided. Parents have different parenting philosophies. They have different approaches to risk, and parents who see something, there are parents who see one thing as a risk you must never run, and there's parents who say, okay, well, this is such a minor risk, it's not very likely to lead to anything bad. I know the risk is very low. I'm going to run it in this case for the sake of my family. The fact that parents have different parenting philosophies and can manage risk in different ways that can all be good means that we should not use the law to impose one standard of parenting. And unfortunately, what lies behind this bill is the idea that we're going to substitute a police officer's judgment or some other authority's judgment for the judgment of a loving parent who may have a very good idea of when you can run this risk. So I don't believe that you should take a punitive approach like that and claim it's doing everything we can to keep parents safe, keep kids safe. It's actually harassing families that may know very well what they're doing. And I don't think that leads to more safety in the end. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Randall. Any other questions of Randall Rose? All right, seeing none, that concludes testimony on Chairwoman Serper's bill, House 5184.